Hey folks, it's Bright Garlick here, coming to you from Southern Australia, Victoria actually, in Southern Australia. Today I'd like to tell you about an ET contact that I had on the 4th of January 2016. You'll have to forgive the flies, they'll be all over the place. You'll see me do the Australian wave quite a few times, and perhaps picking up the wind. We're out here on the plains and it's very hard to avoid the wind. So today is the 16th of January 2016. I want to tell you about an encounter that took place over there on the 4th of January 2016. So what I'm going to try and do today is I've got the camera set up on a stand. I'll try and talk to the camera, but at different stages I might have to move, switch the mic from external to internal. I'm just not sure how that wind is playing out, and I don't have a good muff that I can put on to, a good dead cat to put on to block the wind. So we'll have to give it a go with the limited resources I've got. Sorry about the dark here, I have to have my hat on, otherwise I'll be sunburnt, so I may be in the shadow. So if you bear with me, I'll tell you about an experience that took place, and I guess the reason I want to share this experience is I want people to know what real ETs are like, what real ET contact is like, and to get a sense of what an ET-human relationship is like. There's a lot of stuff on the internet that talks about malevolent, hostile, dangerous, threatening ETs, and it's driving me nuts. It really is. I've been listening to this crap for years and years and years, ever since I started using the RNet and news groups back in 90, whatever it was, 92 or something like that, I can't remember. You know, this idea of hostile aliens and aliens that want to hurt us keeps coming up over and over again, and all the religious nuts who believe that, you know, these are all the minions of the devil and all that kind of stuff. So what I'd like to do categorically, I'm not sure if I've done it in my previous videos, is I'd like to side with somebody like Stephen Greer and say that all spacefaring ETs are peaceful in nature, benevolent in nature, whatever word you want to use. We've got to be careful of words because they create projections, and they're our projections over things, but none of them are overtly hostile. Not all of them like us, and they're tolerant of us, but none of them are hostile. And there's several reasons for that. I've explained them before, and I've had many long heated discussions, and I've had hate mail, death threats, really nasty stuff that's made my life very uncomfortable. So I'm not going to go into that, except to say that this video is for those people who really get what I'm trying to say. That small percentage of people who really want to know the truth, who are not projecting their own shit, their own unresolved inner stuff out into that world. So the reason that there are peaceful spacefaring ETs is because there are what I call the creator races. Races at every level who can, or races I should say, that can create at every level. Races who can create entire realities, who can create universes, who can create galaxies, planets, life, souls. And these races, if you get a sense of what I'm saying, you'll understand that they're highly evolved, they're spiritually evolved, and they ensure that they know everything that is happening at all levels in what we would consider material reality and other realities. And so they inhibit the movement of these groups that might not have got their shit together, the different civilizations and species that are still immature, who are still focused very much on us and them, and adversity and hostility and separation and war and death, and, you know, inflicting death and suffering on others. So they inhibit, they prevent those groups from becoming spacefaring. Sometimes they prevent them from leaving planet at all, and sometimes it's a very gradual process of allowing them to off out into space. But that process is heavily monitored, heavily controlled, if you like. There isn't a quarantine on Earth, but there is heavy controls. We are not allowed to become spacefaring, to move beyond our solar system and to settle other planets and all of that sort of stuff. We are being controlled by the creator races, many of which seeded life on this planet, even created the Earth. So that's the reason, that's the fundamental reason why you're not going to find hostility out there, because it's a gradual process. You know, you grow up and you're allowed to go out there. If you don't grow up, if you're hostile and if you're a threat, then you're going to bring that hostility and that threat out into the universe and create more suffering for other beings. So they're not going to allow that. So I'd like to tell you about a particular experience that took place recently that involved several of what I consider to be creator races. Now that's a term I've come up with to try and describe how I understand them. They don't use that term themselves. And without going into the details, there are many different collectives on many different, excuse me, I've had flies all over my face all morning and it's really annoying. There are many different collectives on many different levels, and these creator races are part of these collectives. So there are three particular creator races that were involved in this visit, but I think maybe others were also what I would consider creator races. I just don't know enough about the details of their race to be able to say. So I'm going to give you a context now, I guess a fuller context about what happened on the 4th of January. I've been having lifelong encounters, and you can, I've mentioned, I think I've made videos about two particular encounters. It might have been January 19th, 2011, the so-called merging with the light experience. And I've also talked about the one on 29th of July 2012. So I guess today's the experience I'm going to tell you about today, it is similar to those experiences, but it's different as well. And the context is this: I have regular face-to-face contact. Nearly every night I have interactions with them in the sky. They will signal back. Sometimes craft will come lower. There'll be flashes on the ground around me. I'll have what I consider telepathic contact. That's, I guess the best way of describing that is it's being able to have a two-way conversation but have feeling, and sometimes there are projections that are put into my mind so I can see things. So these regular experiences are happening, and I've moved from very early on where there was an element of fear, I would say, the uncertainty more than anything about what was happening, to embracing the experiences and really enjoying them and looking forward to them and feeling immense love from the beings who come to visit. Early on I didn't feel the love, and I didn't feel that openness. I didn't feel connected to them in that way. That was my uncertainty, my confusion getting in the way. And I've talked about the developmental stages in the whole process. So I do have a blog if you want to read more about my experiences and how I see this, and learn how to have your own contact. That's something I'm really big on teaching. My blog is etandi.wordpress.com, etandi.wordpress.com, and that's where you'll read any updates I have about experiences or points of view, things I'm talking about, different methods for learning contact. So that's a bit of a backstory. The context for this particular encounter was I had been having contact for several years with a group that called themselves the Beloved carers. That's their term for me. It's not, I'm sharing things that are very intimate, very personal here. This isn't a term they gave to the public, to the world. This is a term they gave to me. And this is a group of 8 ETs that represent 5 different races who have been, I think they've been part of my life right from the beginning, even before this life. I use the term before loosely. Other lives, shall we say. And you might recall, if you've watched my January 19th, 2011 encounter, me talking about the Teal'hia and the creation of souls and the Saronde. So the Teal'hia and the Saronde are 2 creator races, and on that particular occasion when the Teal'hia came to visit, when I asked them who they were, because at that stage I didn't fully understand the name that I had heard, but I didn't know that referred to them. I didn't understand. I was still trying to figure out deeper aspects of the relationship. So when I asked them, who are you? They cut to the chase. But one of the answers they gave me in explaining that was, we are the beloveds. We are the ones who care for you. And once again, this wasn't something that was said to me for the public to know. This wasn't something that was said for the public. It wasn't a descriptor that was given out to the public. It was a descriptor that was given to me. So they call themselves the beloveds, and this group calls themselves the beloved carers. And even though this is a group of 8 ETs who are closely connected to me, I still have a sense that there's 2 things here. One, the beloveds and the beloved carers are the same thing, referring to the many different ETs who intimately care about me and care about our species and our planet. But it's also 2 distinct groups. The Teal'hia on the one hand and the beloved carers on the other hand, which also includes 2 Teal'hia. So one of the things I had been doing with the beloved carers is I had been on a long journey, having many spiritual lessons with them, many lessons that were profoundly changing the way that I see reality, the nature of reality. And I had been using one of the internal contact methods that I've talked about, where together we co-create a world and I meet them in that world. Well, don't know how that wind is with the mic. I'll move a bit closer just in case. Don't want to get sunburnt here. We get whirly winds, kind of like miniature tornadoes rip across sometimes, so it's quite possible one might come across. So I had been having this internal world contact with them and learning these lessons for a number of years, and at different times met one of them here face to face, one of them there face to face, but I hadn't met the entire group, and I hadn't met the entire group in a way that made me feel like this is authentic. Everything you think you're experiencing, you really are experiencing. At different times, I've had doubt. If you don't have doubt during this whole experience and a level of confusion, then you're bluffing yourself. That's part of the growing process. You have doubt, you have periods where you just can't make sense of things. And so I was going through that and having these regular experiences, meeting 1 or 2 of them at a time, and I was really keen to meet them all at once. And so I asked earlier in the year to have that experience, and then on the night of the 3rd I put out a request talk to them about numerous specific issues. And then on the damn flies. Then on the night I went to bed, on the 3rd, I had been really troubled by a particular issue. I've been thinking about the human population issue since about 1989, when I did my science degree. And it had always bothered me, and I had explored all kinds of aspects about it, and I tried to figure out whether it was real, and had found all the evidence to suggest that it was a real issue, a real problem. And you might recall one of my previous videos where the Teal'hia, or what I called the brownies early on, came to me in '97 and explained how our governments would bring in certain methods to control the population, and one of them was paid euthanasia for older people. And it also related to the fact that their budgets would come to a huge crunch, struggling to deal with the health and the ageing population kind of issues. If you see me swallow a fly or one goes up my nose, don't be surprised, because it happens. Today's not a really bad fly day. A really bad fly day is when you've got 30 flies on your face and 100 flies on your back. I don't think there's many on my back. But anyway, let's continue on. So I had been really bothered by this population issue, and I'd been thinking about it a lot recently this year, and more along the lines of what can I do about it individually. I'd been watching, I moved back to my farm here, and I've been watching township about 60 kilometres away just blossom in size, and the destruction of the local environment and the local forests, and just this perpetual expansion, and it really been bothering me. So of course this is happening all around Australia and all around the world, and I lived in Hong Kong as a young man and a young boy, and had seen the same things happen there, and mountains knocked down to make way for people, and all of this kind of stuff. So I went to bed sort of troubled, and usually when I go to bed I'm very much at peace and very settled, and sleep comes easily. So I didn't sleep too well that night, and woke up about 4:15 and couldn't get back to sleep. I usually wake up most nights to go for a pee. Damn flies, because I have one kidney and I have to pee a lot through the night. So I couldn't get back to sleep, and then thoughts of this came back up again, and I was really troubled by it. And then at 5:10 I just had a strong desire to go outside and go for a walk. So I came outside, and I grabbed my iPod as well, because I thought I'm going to hear the morning chorus, the dawn chorus, the birds getting up, and I'll record the birds, and I might make an audio journal entry. I do them from time to time. So I had my iPod with me, and decided that I'd walk out here and visit the neighbour's paddock behind us. So I'll just quickly show you our place, just give you a sense of how different it is. I'm not sure, I'm going to have to just switch the sound here. I've just switched the sound so that it's picking up internally, so I'm not sure if the mic would have picked me up being close to the camera, so I'll just show you. This is our place here. This is what we call our little paddock. So I basically walked up the path here that I've mowed, and over here, and then I went into the paddock. And what I was doing, before I got here, I asked for contact, face-to-face contact. I usually don't specify what kind of contact, but I asked if they would visit me today. So this is a follow-up to the request the night before and the request earlier in the month. And I was particularly keen to meet with the beloved carers, this group of 8. So what I sometimes do is I walk in this paddock and I visit these trees. There are 4 trees in particular. I'll see if I can zoom in on them. And the neighbours' paddocks are very different to our paddocks. They're empty. That's one tree. That's another. And I'm not sure if you can see these ones over the other side there. If I can see it myself, the light's pretty bright coming on the camera. Yeah, I don't think you'll see it too well, but there are 4 trees that are in this paddock, all by themselves, and I like to connect with the trees, and let's just say I feel I have a relationship with them. They're very old gum trees, and it just doesn't seem fair to me that a person would do that to their land. I mean, you can see the difference between the land there. We've had rains recently, so there's a little bit of green coming up, but this was otherwise turning into a dust bowl. When the winds rip across here, it's just horrific. It creates its own dust storm. That's how this farmer farms his land, and usually there's a couple of hundred sheep in there. They haven't been for a while. And this is our place, albeit the grass is dry. You know, there's a lot more vegetation. We don't have much vegetation in this paddock, but in our larger paddock we have a lot more vegetation. So one of the things that's interesting about coming over here is I get a better view of the night sky. So I came out here, it was about 5:15. I get to this point and I'm walking into the paddock, so I'll just switch my volume back to the mic and talk to you over there. So I go out into the paddock and I'm walking across with the intention of visiting the trees. So I visit the first tree, which is over there. You can't see it really. And then I visit the second tree, and then I'm coming back towards this third tree here. Later I visit the 4th tree and back over to the dam over there. And as I'm approaching this 3rd tree here, about 50 meters from that tree, I don't know if you can see that I'm trying to point, but can't sort of line it up with what you're seeing. As I visit that tree, I'll just zoom in for you. Not sure if you can see me or the tree there, but as I get near that tree, about 50 meters away, is when my encounter takes place. So I'll zoom out. Sorry, I'm trying to do this on the fly, and it's not easy to show you everything. So at that point, I'm walking along. I had been looking at the sky. It was a beautiful sky, a very dark night, and it was sort of at that point where twilight was just starting to creep in, and the sun hadn't come up, but you could see that the stars were starting to fade away, and there weren't as many stars visible. Now I've gone back to my iPod and looked at the times that I made the recordings that I made, and I made one recording beforehand when I was fuck off, excuse me, damn flies, when I was just at this point, and then when I crossed into the paddock, and then I made another recording when I came back and I was near the dam over there. I was studying the ants at the dam. There's huge ant nests on either side. So I've determined from the times that my iPod made for the recordings that the encounter took place between 5:25 and 5:45 a.m. I didn't realise that till later, and I went back and then checked the times, and that was the time I came up with. So what I'd like to say is, up front, this is going to be very difficult for me to explain to you, is that I'm not sure what happened to the sense of time during the experience. And if you listen to any of my other videos, you'll get a sense of how time is not as we think it is. And during these encounters, time gets all messed up. There is no... Those of you who follow my blog will have heard me talk about the ET that I publicly call Dude. That's really not his name, but that's what I call him. And he said there is only space. Time does not exist. So just want to preface this encounter by saying that there were anomalies around time. So it's possible that the encounter took place maybe at around 5:30, 5:40 a.m. And the sense I had was that I was with them for more than an hour. But more than an hour didn't go past. Now, often you will lose time, sometimes you'll gain time, contractions and dilations, I call them. And sometimes that doesn't happen, but you are taken, you are visited or taken on board at a certain moment in time, and then you are brought back at that exact moment in time. So if you were to look at a watch or a clock, it would seem as if no time passed at all. And so this is the interesting thing, because I've never been an observer on the outside, I've only ever been in the experience. I don't know if somebody who looks at an experience like this, where a person is visited at the time and taken back at the same time, whether you would see nothing because nothing happened in time, or time was sort of refolded back or re-looped back in, or however you want to interpret it. I'm not sure what you would see. I really am not sure. And I've never had that experience because I've always been in the thick of it. So on this particular day, I just knew that, don't ask me how I knew, but I knew that that after the encounter they took me back right to the moment where they came to visit me. So the time that had passed didn't pass in one sense, if that makes sense. You know, you have to abandon all rational, logical ways of explaining this stuff, because it doesn't follow logic, because logic, in one sense, well, it does follow logic, but in another sense, logic and sequencing follows time, and you want to chuck time out when you talk about this stuff. So what I cannot tell you, I was aware early on when I was walking down that way and around, I was aware, for example, that there were kangaroos down at the creek. I heard them. I didn't see them, but I heard them. I heard the sound of kangaroos. There were birds waking up. There are galahs and cockatoos down there, so I was aware that they were there. And they were all making their noise. There were magpie song. But during the experience itself, I was so focused on what was happening, I have no recollection of any of those other things, whether there were cockatoos, whether there were galahs, magpies singing, whether anything else was taking place. And I can't tell you whether that's because time literally stopped. There we go, there's that. You know, you can't help talking about time, although it doesn't exist, it's a perceptual thing. So I can't tell you whether there was time occurring and other things that were doing their thing as part of time, or whether or not all of that took place and then I was still brought back into the moment, and it's almost like things might have repeated in terms of the outer world that was happening around me. I can't tell you because my focus wasn't on that at all, it was on what was happening in front of me. So I'll try and tell you what took place then. It's getting pretty hot here. Today's not a particularly hot day, it's about 32, 33 degrees Celsius, but it's still warm in these clothes. Usually wear shorts when it starts to get warm. So what happened is I'm 50 meters away from the tree, Just got to check if that sound's coming through. Any sound? Yep, cool. So I'm about 50 meters away from the tree, and suddenly there's a very bright flash. Everything lights up. It's not hard on the eye. It's very white. Other times when I've had experiences, I got a sense that it was sort of golden, like a golden sparkly light. This seemed more of a whitish colour. It's something I need to revisit because it happened so quickly. My memory of it isn't as clear as I'd like it to be. So that happened, and then I think my head was sort of looking outwards ahead of me, and occasionally I was looking up, and when that happened my head was like this. The light happened and I sort of noticed it everywhere. I look up and then there are beings in front of me. So they're kind of standing sort of like in a slightly curved line, and I immediately see that it's the beloved carers, the 8 ETs. But I also see that there's some other ETs that I don't recognise. So what I'll do is I'll quickly tell you who they were and then what happened. I've just got to check my battery life. I've got half an hour left. So here's who they were. There were 2 tall ETs, and these ETs are between 14 and 15 feet, and they were at either side. And they're the race that are called the Suronde. They're one of the creator races, and there's a shorter version, 10 to 11 feet, and they work at a particular base involved in teaching people about certain technologies and spiritual things, although I don't know that they're interested in the spiritual things. All I can say is that place is in England. So they've had a very long history here on the planet. So one of them was one that I know from the beloved carers. The other one I think I'm familiar with. The one who was there, his name is Teal'hia. He's the one that I know. The other one is a female. I won't give you her name. And then there were the 3 Saaland. These are wide-headed guys, and I've had a long relationship with them, a very interesting relationship there. I consider them great teachers. They have 2 different coloured eyes, seem to perform different functions, and their 3 names are Shampa, Quayland, and Taham. I don't always say these names very well, and they don't really care. They care how you react, how you grow. They don't really care whether you remember their names. And I haven't been overly comfortable sharing the names of my ET friends until I guess last year I started talking about these guys a little bit. Then there was, now they were slightly to the right, I think, and then to the right of them there is a human who's close to 6 foot tall. Her name is Halom, and she has it's very hard to describe. She has very refined features, very refined, very elegant looking features. She is a human type ET. There's a long history of humans in the cosmos. I had trouble with this for many, many years. I've started to write about it on my blog, but it's true, there are humans. So she has, I find it very difficult to describe. She has like a yellowy orange hair, sort of honeyish, very distinctive. I suppose some people might say that they were the Nordics or something, but I don't buy into that labelling and all of the things that are said about them. I don't know if that her race is what people would call that maybe is the closest parallel. Now, there was also a human that I had only ever met in dreams, and I don't often see dreams, ET and UFO related dreams, as about that. I often see them as simply symbols that we use to express our own psychic processes and issues. So I'd been having these dreams in the last week about meeting these particular beings, and then there was one of them there. Now, she was about 7 foot tall, very dark toffee coloured kind of skin, a dark brown, and very refined, very unblemished, perfect quality skin. I guess she was very beautiful. The closest description would be that she was Indian-like, from the subcontinent, India. Maybe African, but probably more Indian-looking. So I was very pleased to meet her. I didn't know that they were... I hadn't consciously remembered meeting these people before. Apparently I had, but I had no conscious memory of that. And then the two Teal'hia were closer on the left, and they are Paladin and Pakta. And those of you who've heard me talk about Dude, my ex-wife who was involved with the covert project, I'm not going to say anything about that. I've talked about that before, maybe crossed that line. She's very close to an entity who's been part of her life since she was about 4 or 5, and I publicly call him Dude. He is of the Muad'Dib race. Muad'Dib, age 36 is where they come from. The number isn't the number of the planet, it's the closest translation. So in the same way that Dude is her companion, confidant, one that most intimately watches her life, and has become part of my life, but not in the same way, there is another Teal'hia who is like that for me. And I once asked her, what can I call you publicly if I speak about you? I don't want to reveal your name. And she gave me the name Anamika, which I'd heard that name before, but I didn't know anything about it. So I looked it up, and I discovered that Anamika is a Sanskrit name for lady with no name, which I thought was kind of interesting because they don't care about being somebody's or attention or anything like that. So she was also among them. So the two Teal'hia, Paladin, Pakta, and Anamika were there. And then, look, for many years I had problems believing that there were this particular group of beings with almond-shaped eyes. But I've met these beings, and they're real and highly evolved. And there's a particular being, part of this group. Her name is Ilah, and she's very tall, very elegant. Not very tall compared to the others, about 5 foot, quite elegant. I say tall, and that's relative to some of the other ETs who are very short. So the Teal'hia are very short, 3.5 to 4.5 foot, say 4 foot. Got most of them pegged. Muad'Dib are very short as well, about 4 foot. Dude literally comes up to here, the nipple. I measured it once, wasn't impressed. And as I said, humans very tall, 6 foot and 7 foot. So Ilah was there, and then there was one individual. Ilah had a companion who was with her, who I also met. I can't mention the name. And then there was another individual, and I was really surprised that individual was there. They were at the front. Now this is a non-humanoid looking being. I guess I use that term loosely. Publicly I've called this race the Hoofyfoots. At a later date I'll talk about who they are. They come from several planets. One of them is, I guess the best way to say it is Nalpno. I don't say it very well, I can't pronounce it very well. And sometimes I've called them the Nelp, but there's a more generic term, and I'll talk about that at another time. There always seems to be a right time to disclose what these beings are called to me. I don't see the point of just jumping out with it, because people put all their own projections on stuff and all the garbage that's floating out there. So these beings are very unusual. They have almost like a kangaroo-like gait, these legs that fold back. If you look on my blog, I think I've written about them. I'm not sure, maybe my old blog. And so they have lots of colour variation. This particular one had a yellowy sort of tanny brown colour with lots of flecking and different colours. And they have this wiry hair that goes back. It's sort of like a mohawk, but it's not a mohawk, of course. Very wiry, bristly, and his hair was grey, silvery, and just occasional hairs on the face. And I asked him, I met him, of course, and I asked him, why did you come? And he responded that he knew that I wanted to meet them. They had been in my house in 2007, 3 months prior to my diagnosis with carcinoid cancer, taking samples, and I later learned they were taking skin and hair samples, studying my disease and preparing safe tissue should I need it, healthy tissue should I need it. So I was very surprised that he was there. So there were 4 additional ETs as well as the beloved carers that were there. So I greeted them all. I gave them hugs to the ones that I knew, and handshakes and a bow to the others. A bow to everybody. It's something I do. And they encouraged me to sit, so I sat down. And when I sat down, they sat down as well. And one thing I noticed is, like when the Teal'hia visit, it's very hard to see, but if you look very carefully, they're not actually walking on the ground. They're just slightly above the ground or above the plant level. I mean, the plants aren't very big in there. They were shorter, the tiny little stems that are coming up about that big now, but they were like that big the other day. So they're maybe 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres off the ground, like on a field of energy sitting on this. But to look at it, it looks like they're sitting on the ground or standing on the ground. You have to look carefully, and the reason they do that is they don't like to walk on other life forms. They walk delicately and carefully. I'm just going to have to check my time. Alright, I'll have to speed this up, I think. So I greet them, and then they ask me if I'd like to ask any questions. And so I asked them first of all, why they came, and they said that they knew that I wanted to meet them, and that they were happy to come together, come and meet me, and they brought others that they knew that I wanted to meet as well. So I met all of them, and this was an intensely personal experience, maybe more so than many of the others. Now I've had dozens of experiences since 2011. I've had a lot more experiences, and I only share some things, mostly now because it's just too hard making videos. It's too tiring. I don't have the energy for it. I don't have the resources. I've got shitty software, an old computer, and I can't, make great quality stuff. Good camera, but that's all. And apart from that, when I posted that video, it just opened up a can of worms, and I got all kinds of freaky people contacted me, and death threats, and it just made life difficult. So I post this with some hesitation, but nowadays I just block all comments. I'm not going to get dragged down by anybody that's going to affect the quality of my life. And I'm still healing from my tumours, so I don't want to deal with anybody else's shit. So I have this intensely personal conversation with them about numerous issues. What I'll do is I'll just glance over that stuff and tell you then about the craft. I spoke to them about my health. On that particular day, actually, I was going to have a CT scan as part of my regular oncology follow-up, and I've had a lot of pain in the last, on and off the last 6 months. I left living in the mountains because, as beautiful as it was, the tourists were just hell, absolute hell. I wasn't getting sleep every weekend. People were partying, acting stupid, walking through our garden, stealing stuff, having arguments with me when I'd ask them to turn down the noise and turn off the lights. It was hell. And that was really affecting the quality of my life. So despite everything, despite the difficulty, I moved back to the farm that I left more than a decade ago. My son and I moved back here, and as primitive and as difficult as life is here, and harder, it's more peaceful, and I was happy to do that. But I'd had that, and I'd had a lot of conflict with my son. You know, he's almost 17, and he's had a lot of challenges himself, and he's quite addicted to electronics, and so we fight mostly about that, and I try to be a good dad, but sometimes it's very difficult. And so, particularly when we moved, we had this awful amount of conflict. It was really terrible, really bad conflict, almost physical, and it really affected my health. So I've been having a lot of pain, and I thought for sure my worst tumour in the back here, my kidney had grown, and after 9 years I thought, well, much as I don't believe in the idea of cancer and treatment, you can see my previous video on how to heal through cancer. I see cancer as a thought form. I thought maybe it's time to have the treatment that my oncologist recommended, just to shrink the tumour, and then I could do the other things I need to do to continue healing. Many of my tumours had previously healed, others have come back. So it's really about finding harmony and sorting things out and removing all the conflict from my life. So I spoke to them about that issue, and they told me what was going on in my body, and it's quite interesting because later in the day I went and had that scan, and I was feeling really excited, in a great mood, and the scan went well, and I was feeling great afterwards, and just I felt physically fantastic all day. And the irony is I had about 3-4 hours sleep that day, and I should have been feeling shit, but I wasn't. I was feeling like I'd had a full night's sleep. I was feeling great. Still waiting for the result of that test. They didn't do the measurements properly, so I see my oncologist in another week or so, and they've been hounding the radiologist to do it properly. Anyway, so I then talked to them about the solar event, solar catastrophe, which I've talked about before and had been shown before, but misunderstood what I was shown in terms of trying to pin down dates. So I spoke to them about that, and I spoke to them about the thing that had been bothering me the most, the population issue. And I'm one of these people. I wish to devote the rest of my life to planting seeds and watering them and encouraging other catalysts to take on the issue. So something they explained to me, and later Dude had an extensive talk with me about the subject, was that in my lifetime it will only grow worse. It is not going to improve. Pending solar event. If the solar event happens, that will change things. And it will give certain governments the opportunity to introduce certain control measures. When you talk about population control, everybody jumps on the panic button like you're talking about eugenics and culling humans, genocide. And I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about numerous, plethora of interventions to stem population growth, to reduce the rate and to bring it down to a manageable level. It's not about going and bombing humans and killing humans. It's not about that. I'm not into that sort of thing. So don't hit the panic button and think Bright's saying go and kill everybody, because I'm not saying that. but we have a real genuine issue on this planet. I've had countless arguments with people and received hate mail about the subject from people that believe there is no issue and it's about how we use our resources. Well, all that's true, but it's goddamn well not happening. As a scientist early on in my life, I studied this issue as a person who's had scientific training and observed it, and who's worked in ecology, who's worked in psychotherapy. I've seen the impact of population problems. I've lived around the world. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that, but it's a big issue. So I spoke to them about it. They said to me, it's not going to be resolved in your lifetime. And I asked what I can do about it. What part can I play? So they gave me numerous strategies there to help I guess, other people. And I guess if I could say anything, it's this. There has been a growing movement. Paul Ehrlich talked about it in early days and made extreme predictions, and the Malthusian kind of ideas of population didn't come to pass. And people say, well, look at that, that's rubbish. But there has been a movement in this direction of people encouraging a reduction in population and reducing population growth and migration as well. And I guess that sort of started in earnest maybe in the early 90s, maybe more about 2000. So one thing that was explained to me is this movement will gain traction and slowly develop. We're going for time. I've got 12 minutes to get through this. And so there will be key players. In Australia, Dick Smith is one of them, the entrepreneur. So look at his stuff. He's going to be a major player in time to come. And governments will slowly get on board. It's only around between 2050 and 2070 when people start to see how damaging it is to live on a world with so many people, that there's a real push towards change. So after I'm gone, we will see the population change dramatically, and it will take the better part of 120 years to see major change, 120 years from now to see major change. So that's something I'll be playing a minor role in and doing my part. So we talked about that, and we spoke about other issues. And I also asked them, I asked them, whose craft is this? And they explained something very interesting. They explained to me, this is a Teal'hia created craft. The Teal'hia create millions of craft for thousands of different races. They grow the craft. All their craft are sentient living beings. Many of the craft of the creator races are sentient. They're living beings. They're conscious beings. I've interacted with them myself. And they said, think of this craft as like your United Nations. This is a craft where beings from many different races can come together and do their work, can travel to different places. Just keeping an eye out for snakes. We've had a few big brown snakes here, and they're the second most venomous snake in the world. So just heard a noise, I thought it was a snake. Some grasshoppers too. So they explained this craft is for that purpose. It allows different groups to come together and do their work. So having my guys from the 5 different races come was, I guess, in line with the function of this craft, what they do. So what I'd like to do now is tell you about the craft, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to take the camera off the tripod and to switch the sound back over. And I've only got about 10 minutes to do it, so I'm going to have to hurry up. I hope the wind hasn't been too strong. Okay, so I'll tell you about this craft. Now this craft was very, very big, and remember, I'm under that tree. Well, not under that tree, I'm about 50 metres to the left of that tree. I'm in this area, and sitting down on the ground. Where would I have been? I suppose maybe somewhere here. Sitting on the ground and talking to them. So, this was a huge craft. When I looked up, it covered nearly everything. So, imagine looking up and it's covering nearly everything. Now I'll tell you what everything means. If you go this way, the craft went beyond the end of, there's a paddock here and then there's another paddock, and it's about 2 kilometres that way. And then if you go this way, it went all the way over there. Not quite to the road, there's a road over there and there's a property there. It may have been a couple hundred metres from that property. It went all the way over our property. Our property extends about 1.5 kilometres and it went well beyond that. And if you go over here, it went above the tree line. And remember, I'm over here, right? And I was looking that way, and what I could see is that I could see a gap between the tree line and the craft. It wasn't a huge gap though. And if I looked at the craft, mostly it looked curved. I thought I was looking at a giant circle, right above me. That's kind of what it looked like, a giant circle. But over here, looking in that direction, kind of west, I suppose, what it looked like was there was a, this is not going to be perfect, the craft had a straight, the craft might have been about this level. Now remember, the perspective here is different. And it looked like it had a straight edge for about that much of it. So I asked them, how big is this craft? And they said it was 6 kilometres by 7 kilometres and had a sort of slightly ovoid shape, and it was about 400 metres high. Now I was only seeing the bottom, and that was kind of a mottled, kind of grey, silvery, not like other Teal'hia craft. And it was sitting, I guess, it's very hard to get a sense of perspective here. I'll try my best. Now remember, I'm not over there where I was, so I'm trying to point with my fingers here. The craft was sitting, that tree's probably, I don't know, 50, 60 feet. So it was sitting maybe somewhere like that, about that height, and I'm under the craft. So it was absolutely huge. I asked how many individuals were on it, and they said at the moment approximately 3,500. So that's not a lot of individuals on a craft that size, but I get a feeling it gets a lot more individuals. Or maybe it can travel with very few. So it essentially took up all of the visible space between the main road and beyond over there, and it's very hard to tell from here whether it went past the road or not. I couldn't see clearly. In parts it looked like it did, and other parts it didn't. And then, oh, there's a whirly there, a little one. And it didn't quite reach to the neighbours there. So I should tell you as well, at that time, I don't know if anybody was up, but I didn't see anybody up. And we have 2 neighbours who may have been on 2 neighbouring houses that might have been under the craft. I'm not aware they ever get up early. So, and once again, as I said with the time thing, I don't know if they would have even seen it. Sometimes they can make a craft visible to the person interacting with the occupants, but not visible to anybody else. So I won't tell you about the other things we talked about. Suffice to say that they answered all my questions, and I gave them all a hug and shook the others' hands, bowed to everybody, and they stood back in their group. They had moved around quite a bit when I was meeting them. They went back into their group, and then the flash, and then they were gone, and this is the bit that's a little bit confusing. I don't remember actually seeing the craft go up. I just remember then seeing this brilliant flash up there, brilliant golden flash of light, very big. Very big. I can't really sort of pin down the size of it, maybe a third of the size of the moon, and then several flashes following, and the craft seemed to go northwest in that direction then, and that was it. And then I came back and had a very sound sleep, and as I said, I went on and had my CT scan. So that's that encounter. I'm afraid I can't answer any questions because I just can't go through the whole being bombarded thing again. But I hope it's given you a sense of who these beings are and what they're like, and what the craft are like. I'll probably write about this more extensively, and at some point in the next 2 years I'll sit down and write a book about my contacts. I've had so many people ask me about it. I figure I'll do it at some point. So that was it. That was my encounter with the beloved carers and others. So thank you for watching. Bye for now. There's a button here somewhere and I can't find it. Oh, if you'd like to learn more about how to have contact, lots of free material on my blog, etni.wordpress.com. Check out the How to Make Internet